This is the Infrastructure Matters podcast, brought to you by the Futurum Group. We explore the latest developments in hybrid cloud computing and the technology that underpins it. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the latest trends and technologies that are shaping the hybrid cloud computing landscape. The Infrastructure Matters podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only. Please do not take anything reflected in this show as investment advice. Now your co-hosts, Stephen Dickens, Camberly Bates, and Krista Macomber of the Futurum Group.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Infrastructure Matters. I am one of your regular hosts, Krista Macomber. My typical counterparts, Stephen Dickens and Camberly Bates, are both traveling this week. So I have the pleasure of being joined by Randy Kerns, who is our senior strategist on the team here at the Futurum Group. Randy, so much for hopping on today to join me. Awesome. Yeah, looking forward to it. Do you want to maybe kind of give folks maybe kind of a quick intro in terms of, some of the research you typically do and just some of the engagements that you typically have? I know you work very closely with our IT practitioner and kind of end user clients. So I think folks would love to hear a little bit about that before we jump in.
Sure. I do a lot of work with our clients like you talked about. A lot of that is done to keep current with what's going on in their environment. And then I do a lot of work with vendors. And I can be very confident in talking to them and saying, this is what's happening in your customers, and this is why. And the why is a big part of it. I was talking to you earlier. I just had an engagement with one of our very long-term clients that we do a lot of work with, and they are starting their planning for the next major acquisitions. And this is going to be in the storage area. It's going to be probably somewhere between 100 and 200 petabyte acquisition. So it's a big deal. And I've worked with them before on this. And so I gave them a talk about what to look for in technologies, what's coming. And we talked a little bit about economics. They have gone through this quite a bit with them previously and what's important and doing some economic understanding and making decisions. Going through this with these clients, like I said, is very important from the standpoint that the projects we do around strategies for go-to-market, competitive issues with the vendors, I can speak from a knowledge base saying, this is what's happening today. So it's a lot of fun.
100%. Yeah, it really kind of helps to ground us there. So a lot to dig into, and I'm looking forward to it. So first off, Randy, what we typically do on the show is we spend a few minutes kind of talking about some of the recent news. And I know that one item that you and I both actually had the opportunity to be pre-briefed on, and I wrote up a quick research note on it that will link to the show notes so that the listeners can access that. But this particular announcement was from Pure Storage. And on an announcement that they had kind of introducing a disaster recovery as a service offering. So I thought that would be one interesting item to kind of kick off the show and talk a little bit about, because when we think about Pure Storage, of course, typically they would be very much on the production, side of things. They kind of have their roots in flash storage in particular. So the fact that they're kind of moving into this DR space, and specifically the service initially, what it's going to do is it's going to allow customers to fail over VMware environments from on-premises into a native AWS instance in the cloud. And so really the value, I know that you and I kind of talked a little bit about it, Randy, is primarily twofold. The first is that Pure is going to be handling, pre-conversions and really kind of streamlining kind of those failover operations for customers. So when we think about, for example, the ability to recover quickly from a cyber attack, it has a lot of value from that standpoint. And then secondly, what's very interesting is that because it uses VMware's APIs for data protection via ADP, it actually supports, from a source perspective for the storage, it's not just limited to Pure. It kind of can support really any storage environment. So I know those were a couple things that jumped out from the announcement for me. But Randy, I guess, what other color might you add?
Well, a couple things. One is this is, you alluded to this, this is really kind of out of their swim lane. This is really a data protection type of solution, creating a disaster copy, not specific to storage and not where Pure has offered products before. I I was very surprised by this and the fact that they would do this. And at least currently, this isn't specific to, like you said, to Pure storage. So very surprising. Not sure what the ultimate goal is here, but I would imagine it's caused some trepidation with some of their partners that are the data protection software companies. So we'll have to wait and see how that turns out. But again, very surprised there. And
Yep.
and the second one is, and I think this is really more in line with what the value prop is that Pure brings, is the fact that even in the basic storage systems they've offered, they don't have a long 20-year history with their products and their offerings. And so they would have been able to implement without a lot of the baggage that's carried along over time. They've made their products very simple to use, very streamlined, if you would. And it's more difficult when you start or when you have a product existing, trying to make it simpler. You still have all that code base and baggage and usage cases that you have to carry forward. They haven't had to do that, so they made their products easy to use. This is also something then that, if you think about it, what they've done with this DR as a service, it's incredibly simple. The real value prop I see in here is that the setup is all very used word streamlined. That's a good terminology for it. It's simple, and that just is carries on with the way they've done things for all their development.
100%. Yeah, you bring up a couple of really important points, Randy. First off, I certainly agree in terms of how Pure is going to kind of manage these relationships with, backup software and kind of data protection vendors that it already partners with. I know that when we kind of had a conversation with them, they really tried to make sure to articulate their use case being kind of different than what we might see from kind of a traditional backup and operational recovery side. But, I personally am seeing kind of the lines start to blur between backup and disaster recovery, especially as we kind of think about ransomware and the need to not only maybe have, some quickly available snapshots to recover from, but also in the case that those are compromised, the more colder, if you will, kind of backup copies. So I think the context you bring up regarding the simplicity, that is very important. And I would add, especially when we think about disaster recovery, because part of what has inhibited in the past, in some cases, some customers from being able to get, a true DR implementation is the complexity and the cost of having to buy, manage, all of that separate infrastructure for DR. So if Pure can kind of come in and really streamline that, I think it really stands to make it more accessible. So definitely agree with you there.
It's going to be interesting to see what the uptake is. I think initially it's going to be current Pure customers. If they go off the reservation, so to speak, if they to non-Pure customers, that's going to be very interesting to see what happens there.
Absolutely. And, separately, I've been thinking that as well when we think about, I know Pure has acquired Portworx and has the Portworx backup offering for Kubernetes. So it's very similar, to your point, definitely expect, initial uptake among Pure customers, and we'll see how much it ventures off. So definitely interesting. So, Randy, I know another thing that we kind of wanted to touch on before we get to kind of our bigger picture discussion topic for the day was the fact that we are, here in almost mid-October already. So we're kind of moving into full steam ahead for the fall trade shows and kind of, vendor events that as a team, we typically do every year. I know there's a couple that you and I are going to be at actually together. I think there's maybe a couple additional ones that you're planning to go. So wanted to maybe kind of showcase some of those quickly. I know for me, one that's kind of coming up in a couple of weeks here actually is NetApp Insight. And from my perspective, kind of being our point on data protection, I know it's been interesting for me to kind of watch the evolutions that NetApp has made, similar to the discussion we were just having about Pure Storage, actually, on kind of the data security, data protection front with capabilities like being able to identify anomalies in areas like encryption behavior to identify that a ransomware attack has occurred, and kind of help customers to be able to recover from those attacks. So I know that kind of division within NetApp is kind of their data services division. So that's one area of the business that I'm keen, I should say, to have some conversations with while at the show. But from your perspective, Randy, what maybe is top of mind as we get closer to that event?
Well, I think it's de rigueur to talk about anomaly detection and security and all that, and we expect that now because it's a hot topic. I'm actually interested in understanding a little bit about Blue XP and how that's going to be used. I see that as broadening the data management capabilities, and I think that's going to be instrumental in not only in managing more effectively, but also in processes like data recovery and understanding where your data is and how much you're spending. They've got a lot of capabilities there, including the ESG type things, monitoring power and stuff. I think it's going to be very, very interesting to understand how they're going to be messaging that, and then how they get customers to really effectively use it. So that's a big part of it. The other one is, they always surprise me with some new things, and so that's great. And you get to reconnect with a lot of people you've known for decades now, and they're really good people. So that's why I enjoy a lot of these places.
Oh my God, 100%. The face-to-face, right, at trade shows, you just,
Yeah, exactly.
there's no replacing it for sure. I know that another event, I believe you and I both are going to be at it, is so we're actually going to have the opportunity to attend kind of a dedicated analyst summit with Veeam, and that is going to be a great show. What's nice about these types of events is that we do tend to get a lot of kind of executive time and access. I know heading into that show for me, I know that on this show we spoke a couple of weeks ago about the acquisition of the CT4 team and the Cirrus platform for backup as a service that Veeam made just a couple of weeks ago. So kind of getting an update on that area and kind of digging in a little bit more for me, I know is going to be top of mind heading into that, and just in general, kind of understanding how Veeam is maybe continuing to evolve to support some of these new workloads, continue to bring more sophisticated capabilities for cyber resiliency, recovery from attacks, of course, is going to be top of mind for me. But what else from you, Randy? Anything as we think about that particular event?
Well, there's a lot for me. One of the things I do, we do these classes, obviously, and I got one coming up over in the Netherlands, and especially in Europe. I find a lot of clients I work with, they really want to do a temperature check on their vendors. They are very concerned whether a vendor is going to continue to invest or whether their product's going to become an orphan. They want to know if a vendor may be becoming acquired, and that is a scary proposition for them and everything. And like you said, the FaceTime you get with the executives, you get a better barometer of what's going on. And then I can reflect that with more confidence when I speak with, their customers, our clients, and talk to them and say, yeah, here's what's going on in this particular vendor. In fact, I have a 2-hour session where I do nothing but go through the vendor strategies and field questions. And the questions are amazing. They ask, some esoteric details. They ask big picture, and they want to know 10 years from now. And I kind of look at them going, I have no idea, but the questions are interesting, and these events where you get to talk to the executives give you a degree of confidence when you are working with these people who are making critical decisions and huge investments. You can reflect, here's what's going on, and they can get a little more confidence in it.
It's 100%. So it's hopefully, it helps us because we get information, and hopefully, we can help I would say both the vendors and, as you mentioned, the customers at the end of the day as well. So we give kind of customers that, that candid feedback that's kind of very well informed. And then from a vendor perspective, we can more accurately reflect them and their strategy to customers. So absolutely, it's it helps everybody at the end of the day, right?
Right, right.
Yep.
Another conference that's upcoming, I'm not going this year, but Russ and Mitch are going, is a Supercomputing conference. And it's back in Denver this year, which is great. But this is very important in that this is where the HPC world is incredibly active, and you basically see everybody in the HPC world, which we deal a lot with. And being from Boulder, where we've got some big research labs with NCAR, NIST, NOAA, et cetera. A lot of the people that work in those have been my friends for decades outside of the work environment. So it's always a great thing to go visit. But we, as our group, learn a lot of information there. And probably one of the more interesting things going on there is the HPC is morphing or adopting or whatever a lot of the AI practicalities and futures, and they believe that they understand all that now in the HPC world. So it's a merging of AI and HPC. So it's very important for us to attend that.
I'm impressed that we made it this far in the episode without saying AI yet.
I'm sorry. You did tell me not to.
Right? No, but absolutely. I think, definitely that's an important topic for the supercomputing world, but I mean, really just, for all areas of the technology market, certainly. So, all right. So any other kind of news related or anything else relating to shows, Randy, or do you think that kind of covers everything that's top of mind for you right now?
Well, there's a few more shows. I think you're going to AWS reInvent and interesting things there. And there's probably a couple others that I've forgotten, but they come up.
Yep. Yeah. And we'll definitely be covering them on the show too. Kind of as we all come fresh out of the shows with everything top of mind. So, all right. So Randy, I think with that, I know we've already had a little bit of discussion around data protection, data security, cloud, and you actually alluded to, a particular engagement that you were having with a customer. So shifting gears just a little bit, I wanted to kind of bring the conversation to a discussion around the economics of, using the cloud, and especially when it comes to using the cloud for data protection. I think, when the cloud initially kind of emerged on the scene, for lack of a better way to put it, there was a lot of, buzz and romance around, okay, it's going to save everybody all kinds of money. But I think that we have really seen that that's not the case. And that in fact, you need to use the cloud in an intelligent way in order to be able to reap those cost benefits. I know you and I have been working very closely on some work involving TCO for kind of moving your data protection to the cloud. So with that kind of, background, I guess, Randy, what might be some kind of general thoughts that you have on this topic and kind of what you're seeing?
Yeah, one of the ones that's really interesting is a lot of people that move to the cloud think that they don't need people managing their data anymore, or they associate the administrative people primarily with boxes, and it's really managing data. But the people that are doing administrative work, they've done it to themselves. They're saying, I'm managing this data platform, et cetera. They really aren't. They're managing the information that's on it. And the assumption is for a lot of executives, as they move to the cloud, they don't need those people anymore. So what we typically see is the amount of data in the public cloud balloons, and the costs just go out of sight. And this is where we get into, okay, how many copies do you have there? How are people indiscriminately doing backups, things like that? So the administration work actually gets even a little bit harder. And you really need to have somebody that's paying attention to the bills that are coming in. Yeah. And every cloud is different in the way they charge. It's a pain in the butt trying to figure out where all that money's being spent.
Yep. And then, kind of to that point too, that doesn't even factor in the egress charges. So it's great that you're creating all these backups, right? And that you're storing them. But what happens when you actually need to recover? And that's especially when the costs can kind of mount up. So, that was one thing for me. Yeah.
One of the things we're learning through this project we've been doing is there's the discerning nature of how many copies and what media they're on or what level they're on and how often they're referenced can dramatically affect the cost. And that is complicated to figure this all out.
It really is. And it's you, like you say, you need to have an understanding of, the cost of the underlying kind of storage, what storage, your copies are being stored on, how much you're going to need to access them, how long they're retained for. And also, one thing that I know we've talked about is that, the data, any data reduction, right? So deduplication, compression, that's also where you can really start to have some cost benefits as well.
Correct. That's a huge multiplier. If I can squeeze that down, I save a lot of money.
Yeah.
But the issue is really when I got to get it back, how fast can I get it for recovery?
Yeah.
If I have to take a long time, then that's not good. But if I keep it where I get it back quickly, maybe that's costing me too much. It's quite the economics exercise to figure all this out.
Yeah, it really is. And I know in our conversations, Randy, we've kind of broken it up into two general categories. So one being what we've described as these hard costs that really can be more specifically calculated. So things like we've mentioned, okay, the cost to store the data, the cost even for data egress, the cost for some kind of basic, management task on a day-to-day basis for, as you mentioned, Randy, managing those data assets. But the other side of it too is what we call soft costs. And what I think has been really interesting about that conversation is that as the issue of cyber attacks has become more prominent, and as cyber attacks have actually been the major disaster, if you will, that customers need to recover from versus what we've seen more traditionally, something like, a natural disaster or something like that. That's where what we call these soft costs really start to come into play and have a very material effect. So I don't know if you maybe want to kind of talk about, I know we talked about some key assumptions that go in there. I can certainly jump in, but that was one thing that I think was interesting to me coming out of some of these conversations.
Yeah, basically we're talking about value here, and there's value in not having to do something because it's done for you. There's value in like you say, in some of the soft costs, in that a lot of the planning and things done for resiliency is part of the solution. Whereas if I don't do it, then I have to manually go do it somewhere else. There's real value in that, but those are all highly variable. And when you're dealing with some customers that are going to be making a purchase decision, for example, they may want to say, let's disregard that because I don't care about it, or this isn't my situation. The hard cost, no arguments. The soft cost, I've had the arguments, I've got the scars, and say I normally separate the two, and I say the hard cost is what you make your decision on. The soft costs are where you get more value.
Yeah, 100%. So maybe we can, I guess, talk a little bit about some of those scars, not to bring up some PTSD, but maybe we can talk a little bit about that. Some of the conversations that you've had, Randy. I know we have had conversations around, okay, again, leaning a little bit into kind of, this, the cyber attacks and cybersecurity areas of things like, okay, your cyber insurance premiums, how much those might go up if you are attacked, the cost of your downtime if you are attacked and you cannot recover, how much does every hour cost your business, those types of things. So I guess maybe any commentary from some of those conversations that you've had might be interesting to our listeners.
Yeah, the insurance one is one I'm somewhat down on right now. In that, if you go through, I did this with a vendor, go through their checklist for their cyber insurance. You have to do this, this, and this. There are so many holes in it, such that they wouldn't have to pay if you didn't do things. Very irritating, but there's a number of them such that if you get a particular solution, it can checkbox a bunch of those that'll help you quite a bit, and it actually buys down your insurance. So sometimes going through this with a new solution can make your insurance a lot cheaper. So that's worthwhile to exercise to go through. So that's a biggie. some of the other things that you might go through and figure out on the restoration, recovery processes, et cetera, the ability to test those, the automation around that,
Yep.
very important.
Yep. Yep. I know the testing. I mean, I'm really glad you brought that up, because it's that, in fact, is becoming not only, a best practice, but a requirement for, maybe for insurance, as we've been talking about, also for things like compliance with these, data privacy regulations that over the last several years, we've seen become more and more common. So I guess, the easier and the less expensive a particular tool can make that testing process be, is going to be another area that can really add a lot of value.
It can. The other one is, let me just go through an example here with one particular client. And a particular organization had what they called a tabletop exercise on recovery. That's where they all sat around the table and figure out, yeah, we can do it. Okay, we're good. And obviously, it wasn't good enough in this particular case, or I probably wouldn't have been involved. And the executives came down and said, "You didn't test this? There's no good answer here." So
Yep.
it's very important to do this.
Yep. 100%. 100%. So Randy, I think the cost conversation, again, I think it's, as customers are really looking to maybe lean on the cloud, to make their lives a little bit easier, a little less expensive. I know it's an important one. I think we hit on the key topics that I had, in mind coming in. Is there anything else you might add?
One more on the economics is that a lot of people look at it with a short-term perspective. Your information, your data, the data you keep, the value of the data, that's going to last for a very long time. So normally we look at things from a longer perspective. If you're going to do things for costs in the cloud, you want to do checkpoints 5, 7, 10 years out there, and look at the compounding costs over that time. Much more important, and it can be frightening at times.
It absolutely. But yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because it definitely is that longer term conversation. And, the issue of it compounding, it's very true. You might save X amount in year 1 or 2. But again, that can really just kind of snowball upon itself and really save a lot of money over time, which, is something that I think is important for us all to keep in mind, especially if we're not buying and deploying a box on premises, that becomes a little bit more evident. Okay, I'm going to be upgrading this every, 3-5 years. Okay, but what if I kind of move to this cloud model and have that in place for, as you mentioned, 5, 7, or even longer? What is my business going to look like? So absolutely, I'm glad you brought that up.
One of the questions that always comes up, again, the project I was doing where they're talking about they're accumulating or collecting lots of data. I asked them, how long are you going to keep this data? And you get this strange look back. And I said, well, forever. And I said, okay. So this is something that's going to keep charging you money for a long time. And
yes.
You can just see the wheels start to turn, or starting to think about this long-term cost.
Yep. It's so easy to swipe a credit card and to not think about the longer term view. So
exactly.
Absolutely. All right. Well, with that, unfortunately, I think we are just about out of time here. But Randy, I want to thank you so much. This has been a pleasure as always. It is always so great to hear your perspective. You're always very grounded in the view and the vantage point of the customer, which I think is so valuable to keep in mind. So thank you very much.
Okay. It's all fun.
And thank you everyone kind of for joining and for listening. We really appreciate it as always. Please make sure to subscribe to make that you don't miss any future episodes from us. And we look forward to seeing you next time here on Infrastructure Matters.